What's going on YouTube? Drew here with Harbinger Cosplay, and welcome to the first video in our 2020 Comic-Con costume cosplay build. I know that's a lot, but bear with me here guys. In this video, I'm going to be introducing you all to the build. Most notably, the inspiration for it, the materials we're going to be using in it, the tools we're going to be using to cut, shape, and mold those materials, and last but not least, the coolest part, the status of the build. That's right, I've been working on this for probably the past year or so off and on, and most recently I've done some off-camera work to put it all into a uniform kind of state that we can build from there. So we have the base going right now, and we're going to be building onto it, throwing on detail and additional levels and layering on it as we go through this build. So stick with me guys, thanks for tuning in, let's get started. First, let's talk about the inspiration for the build. If you've ever played or heard of the video game Destiny, then you know of the 3 different character classes you can play as for your specific gameplay style. The Hunter, the Warlock, and the Titan. Since Destiny 1 was released and I started playing the video game, the Hunter has been my jam ever since. Also, in the game, there's a species of enemies that you fight from Destiny 1 all the way through Destiny 2 called the Hive. Now the Hive are a ritualistic and almost zombie-esque sort of species, and because of that, they're very skeletal and rigid in the way that they're designed in the video game. So what we're going to do in this build is try to combine those 2 aspects, the Hunter armor type and style with the Hive ritualistic zombie-esque rigid sort of skeletal structure of those specific characters, and this build is going to be called What Remains. Next, let's talk about the materials that we'll be using for this build. There are 2 different types of foam we'll be using which will constitute the bulk of this costume. The first is EVA foam and the second is craft foam. EVA foam is essentially just interlocking floor mats that you can purchase at most major hardware stores. And craft foam is thinner foam which is more malleable and we can use to make more intricate pieces of the build, and we're going to be using 5mm, 3mm, and 1mm thickness of that craft foam to be able to vary our approach in the leveling and the depth of the build. Let's talk about some of the tools we'll be using in this build, but before we do, some housekeeping procedures. First and foremost, make sure you carefully read any of the directions for use on each one of these items to ensure your own safety as well as the safety of those around you. Second, make sure you carefully adhere to any safety warnings on these items, especially in relation to any eyes, ears, or nose and mouth protection advisements they may have. And lastly, if you don't feel comfortable using some of these tools, make sure you have a parent or a trusted adult with you that can assist you in using each one of these. With that being said, the adhesives that we'll be using in this build are barge cement and hot glue. We'll also be using a ruler, a lighter, X-Acto blades, a sharpening stone for those X-Acto blades to make sure they stay nice and sharp to get good, clean, smooth cuts. We'll also be using scissors, a Sharpie, and then we'll also have tweezers to remove any excess of that hot glue that we may have throughout the build. We'll be using Quick Seal to cover up any of the seams that we may have that we don't want visible, which we can then sand down smooth later on. We'll be using a heat gun to be able to mold some of the foam and shape it to what we want it to be, and we'll also be using sandpaper. Those constitute the bulk of the tools we'll be using for this build, but if we do have any additional ones, whether materials or tools that come up throughout the build, I'll make sure to let you all know as they show up. Guys, if you made it this far in the video, thanks for watching. I know some of that was a hassle, but I wanted to make sure you were all aware of the inspiration for this build, as well as some of the materials and tools we'll be using in it. This is the exciting part, the status of the build, where we're at right now. As you can see from this clip, we have the helmet, the shoulders, the chest and back plate, the belt, and the hip plates, all at a good base point that we can build on and move forward from. I'm super excited about where it's at right now, and I'm only thinking that it's going to get better from here on out. Thanks for watching. This has been Harbinger Cosplay, and remember, he is faithful.